Hello and welcome to another week of Abbie Thoughts. I hope you are keeping well amidst all the Tory chaos and economic meltdown. And on that topic, I have been thinking a lot about politics and government these last few weeks, especially with the whole trust situation or the ex-trust situation. And I feel as if I realized there are a few gaps in my knowledge when it comes to politics. Um, I think many of us assume we know how parliament and government works, and some of us really do know what we are talking about. So maybe what I talk about today, will be more of a refresher. But I feel like there's a lot of people like me who maybe have forgotten some of the finer points of detail of how our country works. So hopefully some of the thoughts I've been having and the things I found out this week will be a good way for you to bring to mind or just make you more aware of how the country tends to go on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. So pretty sure I have most of my details correct, but if I do mix up anything or there are things I'm not quite aware of, do subscribe, leave me a message, let me know how I am doing. So um, I wanted to focus first on talking about the government and the general election, hot topic. So when you talk of the government, that is actually 120 ministers that are chosen by the Prime Minister. And these ministers, they're also known as Secretary of State. These Secretaries of State run all the government departments. So the Department of Health has a minister or Secretary of State leading it. The Treasury has a minister leading it. Culture has a Secretary of State. Sport has a Secretary of State. Farming has a Secretary of State. So the list goes on. You get my kind of point that somebody is in charge of every area of UK policy. If you're worried about energy, say, you should be looking at what the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy is up to, because that's their official title. And their focus is definitely not just on energy, which might be why our prices have shot up. They also have to worry about business and industrial strategy. But nestled in there is also the fact that they are Secretary of State for Energy as well. And you probably remember when Jeremy Hunt was Minister for Health, and all the doctors all the junior doctors were making up rude names with his surname because he was the one in charge of looking after our health and also looking after their salaries and time off. So being a minister is a big deal, and being a Secretary of State or Chancellor is a big deal because the buck stops with you and you are the person that is supposed to be responsible for that area. So at least now you do know who to harass if you feel something's not working out in a particular policy area. Maybe the trains are taking too long to arrive, your doctor's taking too long to give you an appointment, your porridge isn't warm enough, etc., etc. These are the people you need to be chasing if you really want to take it to the top. I mean, maybe start with your MP, but if you feel like nobody's listening to me about this issue, then the Secretary of State for that issue is the person you need to be looking up and harassing as much as possible. So now those 120 ministers, they are the government, they are the people, the mafia, so to speak, the ones running it all. But of those 120 ministers who do form the government, 22 of them are chosen by the Prime Minister to be in the cabinet. The cabinet is simply the most senior ministers, the ones who really help lead the country. They're the core group of people who are, they're the most trusted and they're in charge of the most critical tasks that it takes to run the country. So, setting the budget, defense, health, social care, work and pensions, trade. These are the 22 people that they're in the room with the Prime Minister every week. And they are just really hashing out the way the country should be going, the direction they want to take us in. So cabinet meetings are really important meetings. You'll tend to hear them mentioned in news reports. You know, the cabinet met this week, they're in the cabinet meeting. And so those are the key people who really hold the keys to the kingdom. And if you go on the gov.uk website, you can see a list of all the cabinet members, and you can also see the 120 ministers in general who do form our government. So I'm sure you're asking as well after I've said all this, but where do MPs fit into all this? You know, who are they? Why do we keep talking about them if they're not even really the government? So MPs help make sure the country is being run well by the government. They are the MPs are the people that question the government. They question those ministers, especially the prime minister. They question them to say, you know, what are you doing about social care? What are you doing about children, you know, going to bed too late? Like, how are you helping to correct some of these problems that MPs tend to see because MPs are based in local areas. So your MP for your area is able to take your issues to the government and sort of say, you know, a lot of people in the Northeast are going through this particular issue. What are you going to do for us? Or a lot of people are complaining about the trains. What are you going to do about it? Or why aren't you doing enough about it? So MPs are kind of important in that they put questions to the government and the Prime Minister every week. Especially on Wednesdays when there is Prime Minister's questions, you can actually watch the MPs question the Prime Minister on how they're doing and what they're doing about some of the issues people are facing. So if you do go on YouTube, you can also go on UK Parliament TV. Also, some of the BBC networks will show you Prime Minister's questions. It takes place every Wednesday. It is free for anybody to watch. So do look it up on YouTube and have a watch if you want to kind of get a better idea of what's going down in the hood, in the country, in Parliament. And yeah, it's pretty interesting watch. It tends to start getting repetitive. You start to see some of the key themes. So I'm not sure you need to constantly be watching it, but it can be very engrossing. And there are people who it becomes a bit of an addiction, making sure that they tune in each week to find out what's going on in HQ. And obviously it takes place on Wednesday, but I think the broadcast of it, unless you watch live, unless you're actually there as well in person, but I think the broadcast comes out kind of like Thursday, Friday. So if you do have a look on there and you're not seeing the latest one, you might just need to give it a few days. So yeah, I was talking about where do MPs fit into all this. Before I really give you a detailed answer, you should be aware Parliament is the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the monarchy. And it's really the House of Commons that does the bulk of the work of leading and running the country. So I'm really going to just focus on the House of Commons as they're the ones who do the most critical work. So the House of Commons consists of 650 members of Parliament, and these MPs represent the UK public, and they stand up in the House of Commons to voice our opinions or our feelings or our feedback. And they also go to committees where they can more directly address our interests and concerns. They get to go to these meetings with the Secretary of States, with the various ministers, and really kind of get into figuring out how to solve some of the issues that maybe their constituents have raised to them before they went to Parliament. So, you know, the MP also gets to question the Secretary of State. It's to make sure that issues are being sort of developed as they should be. MPs also do consider and propose new laws, so they're a key part of bringing up, you know, oh, we need a law to stop this, or we need a law to tackle, I don't know, children and vaping or whatever it is, and they help to get those laws pushed through Parliament and get them passed into UK law, and then it becomes something that we all have to pay attention to, unless we're bad people. So, yeah, MPs are pretty important in terms of monitoring and making sure that the country is being run well, and making sure that ministers and the prime minister are doing the things they should be doing and watching out for the whole UK public, not just a few segments of the public. So our 650 MPs, they do form the House of Commons, and the House of Lords, that's a separate issue, separate house, and I can obviously talk about that on another day. But this week, my focus really was on the House of Commons, the government, the Prime Minister, and just making sure that you're aware that they're the real people that you can follow to see what's going on with our country. So that's that. You know, the MPs, the members of Parliament, they are the ones in the House of Commons, making sure the government is doing the best job that it can. Hopefully, they will be improving on that job, seeing as some of their actions lately have been very interesting, huh? So, people do tend to say, well, what about the general election? I hear so much about we need a general election. Are they going to call a general election? What are people going on about? It is something you should be aware of. I'm sure you do kind of know what a general election is, but just to get a bit more specific, a general election is an opportunity for people in every part of the UK to choose their MP. And that is all it is. It's not actually about choosing the Prime Minister. When you choose your MP, you don't also get to choose who you want to be Prime Minister. You simply choose your MP in a general election, and this person represents your local area in the House of Commons for up to 5 years. So, the candidate that receives most votes from the people in their local area or constituency becomes the MP for that constituency. And in a general election, the political party that wins the most seats forms the new government, and their chosen leader becomes Prime Minister. So the Conservatives won the most local seats in the last election, so their party leader got to become Prime Minister. So it's the Conservatives themselves who choose who their leader will be, and it's their leader who gets to be the Prime Minister. We don't actually get a say in that unless we're actually a part of that particular political party. So if you do go along to Conservative Party meetings, if you're a lifelong member of the Conservative Party, or you joined when you were 25, very suspect, and decided that you wanted to be a Conservative from that age, you do get to take part in deciding who the leader of your party will be. And then if you are lucky enough, or the people decide they want the Conservatives to be in power, then whoever you chose as party leader gets to lead the country as the Prime Minister. And like we said, the Conservatives won the most local seats in the last election. They got to become the government and to form a parliament. And a hung parliament is a parliament in which no political party wins a majority of seats. So, you know, maybe there's obviously 650 seats, and it ends up being an equal split between all the parties. Suddenly it's not clear who's supposed to lead. Then the various parties have to figure out what they will do about that. Maybe two of them join up and lead us. You know, maybe they say, actually, we need another election. You know, these kind of things. It's happened quite a lot in the last 10, 15 years anyway, that people have kind of had to join up with another party. It normally leads to disaster. We normally end up having to call another election just to kind of sort out who really should be in power. But there you go, you know, a hung parliament, again, another phrase I'm sure a lot of us have heard, but weren't quite sure what it really meant. And it's simply just, well, there's no clear winner from this general election. So now we're going to have to come up with a sort of half effective solution. Normally in the general election, there is a choice of several candidates in each constituency. So it's not normally just one person putting themselves forward. There's normally about maybe 4 people that want to be an MP for your constituency. Some of those people will be the local candidates for national political parties. So it will be the local Conservative person going for it. The Labour Party puts forward a candidate. but you don't actually have to be a part of any of the main parties to become a leader in your area. So, any of us, if we really wanted to, we could campaign and become the MP for our local area. It does sound like a bit of like a bad Hollywood movie, but if you really felt that you could be the best MP for your area, you can stand in the local elections, and if people decide they want to make you the MP, then you get to be the MP for your area. But I do think and I do find that most people do try and align themselves with either Labour or Conservative. It just helps you shape country politics a bit easier. And you don't necessarily have to be the most ardent Labour supporter. You don't have to be the most conservative person. But if that's kind of the party that's closest to what you're aiming for, then if you're a very canny type of leader, it might be for the best to sort of say, I align myself with Labour, I'm happy to stand as a Labour candidate, but I'm definitely going to be pushing issues to do with the kind of things I know my area needs. And that's just part of playing politics. It's up to you to decide what the best way to run would be. I do wonder, have you ever had to contact your local MP and what was their response like? I know for myself personally, I've had three situations in the last year where I had to get in touch with my local MP, and they were fairly easy to reach. A bit of time to reply to me, but not bad. They acknowledged that they'd received my sort of email quite quickly, but then, I think I'm sure they had to take a bit of time to read through the issue I'd raised and see if there was an effective solution. And the first two times they were really helpful, and I was like, oh wow, democracy is so cool, my MP is so cool. And then the third time they kind of gave me some kind of dodgy, slightly unhelpful information. So I was a little bit like, a little less enthusiastic about what MPs can do for you, but definitely I think the responsiveness was really great. And I think it was, even if they didn't give me like the perfect advice, it was worth it to realize like they do take the things you say seriously. They are aware that you're trying to get something changed or improved, and they appear to mostly be on your side. So, yeah, I'd love to know if you've had some great stories come out of you getting in touch with your MP and if they were able to help sort something out for you that probably would have been near on impossible without their intervention. So yeah, that's a thumbs up for MPs when they actually do push through and get things done for you. Sorry, I need a break. Talking, it's so exhausting. So, the next thing I was thinking a lot about this week was obviously with general elections, who actually calls a general election? Do they just wake up one day and, Liz Truss says, "Oh, now I want an election." Does it come from the like the party in power? Does it come from the king? Who calls a general election? Why do we suddenly get those letters from the council saying, it's time to vote in your local election? So when I looked into it, it's the government of the day. They can decide when to call a general election. And if a government doesn't call an election, they automatically are out of power after 5 years from the day that they first met as a parliament. So our current parliament first met on Tuesday, the 17th of December 2019, shortly after they were elected, and they will cease to exist as a government on Tuesday, the 17th of December 2024. So, unless they call a general election before December 2024, they will effectively be done with December 2024. So, do keep a lookout for that. Keep yourself ready. If you're looking forward to this party being out of power, December 2024 is your date when you can really celebrate, and it can be a bumper Christmas for all sorts of reasons. So, governments only tend to call a general election early if they think they will win. Um, Currently, obviously, with opinion polls, Labour are clearly in the lead in terms of how people feel about who would be the better party to lead the country. So Labour in the lead by more than 30 points. And that means that if the Conservatives were to call a general election right now, for whatever reason, they would likely lose, as people don't really want them to be in power. So it's very unlikely that we are going to see the Conservatives call a general election. They're likely just going to wait until the bitter end in 2024 before they think to call a general election. But to be fair to them, um, if the next prime minister that they elect, so obviously at the moment Liz Truss has resigned, if the new person that they put in power is someone that ends up being really popular with the public for whatever reason, then there is a chance Conservatives could say, actually, let's call an election. People feel that we're now moving in the right direction. So if we call an election now, say in 2023, we're more than likely to win. So they might adopt that strategy. So do keep a lookout for that. You know, if for whatever reason Conservatives do a big turnaround and start doing the kind of policies that the public really can get behind, then they might call an early election and we will have to see what happens as a result. But for now, it's very unlikely that they're going to do that. The other thing that can happen is Parliament can also force the government to call an early election. So if 2/3 or more of Parliament vote to say that they have no confidence in the current government, then that government has to call an election. So the Prime Minister would have to resign or ask for Parliament to be dissolved, and a new general election would take place. Again, currently the Conservatives have the majority in the House of Commons, so 365 MPs out of the 650 are Conservatives, and so they have a clear majority. So again, it's unlikely that they're suddenly going to turn around and say, oh, we have no confidence in this government, let's get rid of them. If anything, they're going to make sure that they just continue business as usual. But again, if enough Conservative MPs rebelled and said, oh, we don't have any confidence in our own party's government, or they decided they didn't want to vote at all, they wanted to abstain, just so that they couldn't be accused of being traitors and they just wanted to stay out of it, then the rest of Parliament could say, actually, we don't have confidence. And if they were the majority, then we would get another general election. But like I say, unlikely to happen. Conservatives are going to hold on to power. And so look out for your next general election to be early 2025. When we get another say in who should be leading the House of Commons. So after all of that, you might be asking yourself, well, how do I actually vote? You know, I want to make sure I have a say the next time this election comes around. And it's quite simple. You just need to go to the gov.uk/register to vote page, and you'll just need your name, address, and national insurance number, and that will get you registered to vote. And then a few weeks before the election or before an election, you will receive a polling card in the post. And a polling card, it's just a stiff piece of paper that says poll card on it. So you definitely can't miss it. You will know it's your polling card. And it has the details of the date of the election, your polling station, which is where you go to cast your vote, the time that you'll need to be there, and just any kind of information to do with what you need to know so that you can vote on the right day. And the polling stations, they're normally open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. on the day of the election. And it's normally just like a school or a library near to you where you can go and cast your vote. And when you do get to the polling station, the staff will give you a ballot paper, and you can take your ballot paper into one of the polling booths so that no one can see who you're voting for. You just need to read that ballot paper carefully. It doesn't tend to have a lot of information on it. You just need to mark your ballot paper according to the instructions. And what that normally means is you're just asked to put an X in a box, in the box of your preferred candidate. So there's normally just like three boxes, three options of who you want to vote for. Put an X in the one that you want to be your guy or gal, and that is it. That is all you're doing, and it means you voted. And hopefully, if democracy is real, then your vote will be counted and you have had your say in who you believe the best people for the job are. So, with all of that said, there is something else that is absolutely essential that I point out, which is that people do talk about general election and local election. They also mention national government and local government, and these are two different things. There is a big difference between our national government, which is the MPs, the 120 ministers, the Prime Minister, and there's a difference between that and the local government, which is your councillors and the council itself, which is led by its head and the executive, whoever that is for your area. So local elections are a different thing from general elections. People sometimes call them the same. Some people sometimes say general election when they actually mean local election and vice versa, but they are two different things. They do often take place on the same day, just to be a little bit confusing, but it's always kind of clear that on one hand you're voting for your councillors and then you're also voting for your MP. So just be aware of that. Just sort of take note that it's two different things that you're talking about when you talk about these two types of government. And you can actually choose to sort of vote for your local councillor and decide not to vote for the MP. It's totally up to you what you think your priorities are. Obviously, most of us vote for both, or pretty much we mostly focus on the MP. We forget to sort of take more of an interest in our actual local area elections, but that's a different talk for a different day. But yes, local government and national government are two totally different beasts. And with the government, the ministers and the MPs, they tend to care about issues at a national level. So they'll be looking at things like England's education policy, NHS waiting times, the energy crisis that affects everybody, etc., etc. Local government is your local council, and they're looking, that's your councillors, and they're looking at local issues. So they'll be thinking about things like, are your bins being collected? What are local kids being bullied at school? These are the kind of issues they're focusing on. Really, just anything that's happening in your local area. They're not really concerned with the town next door to you. So whatever Leeds is doing, whatever Birmingham is doing, whatever Newcastle is doing, they don't have anything to do with that. They simply just focus on issues happening in your area. So your area might have a problem with like heroin addiction, and they're going to be able to focus more on that. They're not really going to listen to the government's ideas on something to do with a local issue. Um, so yeah, your local council, your councillors, they are the people who actually run your area. So it's not actually your MPs that you need to care too much about when it comes to your local area. Um, like I said, MPs go to Parliament, whereas your councillor will be going to your local town hall to conduct meetings. You'll never see your local councillor in Parliament because that's not their job. Uh, your local councillor will be looking at local problems and how to improve your local area, and they are the people that collect council tax to help with running your local area. All council meetings are public, so if you did want to know what your council is talking about, what they're focusing on, you can go on the council website, you can look up the minutes of their meetings, and you can read through anything that they are discussing at the moment. I was on there just this week and they were talking about like school attendance and improving that, and you can have a good read through how the schools in your area are doing and which ones are facing certain issues and which ones are doing really well in some areas, and what your councillors think about it, and also all the feedback and research they've done to help them improve or tackle any particular issues that they have to be concerned about. So local government are really the ones who really run your life on a day-to-day basis, and what they do actually affects you in a more obvious way than what the government does. And like I said, rubbish collection, schools, transport, care, health in the area, they're the ones going over that kind of data and seeing what needs to improve, and then they're the ones coming up with ways to improve it. Um, Yeah, so I would really say, your local council is probably are working a lot harder on a day-to-day basis in a lot of ways than perhaps your MPs and the government in general. But again, like I say, obviously MPs and the government are dealing with like laws and things like that at a national level, and a lot of what they do does trickle down to the local government anyway. So there is kind of like a seesaw balance act going on there. I can't conclusively say who's doing the harder job, but I don't know, in my head, it appears to be the local councils, just saying. So, yeah, the local elections, a councillor is elected by local elections. They represent their area at local council meetings. And most of the time, if you have a problem, e.g., a library fine or your neighbour is building a shed on your land, you would contact your local councillor. You shouldn't really need to contact your MP about local issues. Your councillor is more likely to be aware of how they can help you on a day-to-day basis. But MPs are pretty useful too, so it is what it is. But local elections are slightly different to the general election. They normally do take place on the same day, but again, they can take place at different times. So do stay informed and do look on your council website if you want to know when your next local election is. They do normally take place, like pretty much guaranteed, they do take place on the first Thursday of May. So, around the end of April, that's always a good time for you to be thinking about, do I want to vote in my local election? And, getting ready for the fact that that first Thursday in May is going to be a local election, unless they decide to be strange for some reason the next year coming. And when you elect a councillor, they do get to be a councillor for 4 years. So MPs get 5 years, councillors get 4. And councillors represent a ward, which is basically a fancy way to say, a local area. MPs represent a constituency, councillors represent a ward, and wards tend to be a bit smaller than constituencies. And most of the main areas in the UK, so Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Exeter, Reading, Newcastle, any of these areas tend to have about 30 wards each. So, for example, it's simply an area of a town. So Manchester has 32 wards and it has 3 councillors per ward, and there tends to be about 12,000 people living within a ward area. And if you're somebody that lives in Manchester, you'll recognise some of these wards that we have. So some of our wards are Ardwick, Chorlton, Longsight, Deansgate, Moston, Piccadilly, Whalley Range. You get, these are all areas within Manchester, and there are 3 people in charge of each of these areas. So at least now you know what people are talking about when they mention wards. If something's bothering you in your ward, and you want to do something to improve your ward, then get in touch with your councillors, get to know them, and you can talk to them about whatever you need help with. They tend to have regular surgeries, normally in the local library, where they meet people to talk to them about whatever issues or ideas they have. So hopefully it's not as mysterious to you as yesterday what to do if you have an issue that you want to bring to somebody's attention. And that is literally all I wanted to say or talk about or discover this week when it came to politics and general elections. I'm hoping something I've said has stuck with you or made an impact or made you more aware that you could be an MP if you really wanted to be. And yeah, that is it this week for Abbie Thoughts. I've literally not thought that much about anything else. And if I have, it would sound pretty lame next to um, the main thing that's dominated our week. I mean, obviously, I've had all the usual get up and eat, sleep, drink stuff going on. But yeah, looking forward to the next general election, making sure you know who your local councillors are. That's been my main focus this week. So I hope you enjoyed this ride through our government, and I will hopefully catch you on the next episode. Bye bye.